What an incredible privilege to be with you this morning. Wow. Just moved by the Spirit of God that's in this room. Listen, I'm all about the family of Christ. I'm all about the church. But there's something about his presence. It's universal. Every room I've walked into where the body of believers are gathered with an expectation, whether it's been on this side of the world or had the privilege of being in Prague and South America on different islands dotting the coastline, and still, regardless the language, the moment the children of God come together, it's one of my favorite passages, how the Spirit of God rests on the praise of his people. That when we elevate him, he shows up, and he has this morning. I hope you sense that. And I know that some of y'all have some questions, and we need to get down to some business, but I just want to first make sure that you know that the Spirit of God is here, that he's here. You know who else is here? My beautiful wife and children. And I want to take a moment and recognize them, give you a chance to kind of see, well, the beauty I get to wake up to every day. So this is my beautiful wife sitting on the front row. Would you just kind of stand and wave? I didn't tell you I was going to do this. That's odd. I know. Awkward. I'm going to pay for that one later. And then my boys are with me today. And then, just because I love family, I want you to know my mom and dad made the trip to come out today. They're playing hooky from church this morning to come here and do church with us. So they're in the back there and wave at us. Yes. You might know my dad. He's here every Thursday. I often joke that if I wasn't his pastor, he would actually be here at Hope every Sunday because Mike is by far his favorite pastor in the city. But we have some blood ties that keeps them coming. We're a big family people. How many people come from big families? Big families? Yeah. So on my side of the family, 4 brothers and sisters. On my wife's side of the family, she has 3 younger sisters. And we do that careful holiday thing that every family does. How are you going to spend time with what family? You know what I'm talking about? And then the moment you have kids, it even gets more complicated because you can't offend one set of grandparents because you spent too much time with the other set of grandparents. I might be, turning up some old stuff in you right now. Like that careful balance. And I remember last year, or actually it might have been the year before that, we decided we were going to spend a little time with my sister-in-law in beautiful Maryland. My sister Lauren owns this beautiful house on the Chesapeake Bay. It's gorgeous. Now the house itself is beautiful. They've done a great job. I love the house, but you don't buy a house like that for the house. You buy the house like that because when you look outside the back, the Chesapeake Bay, they have a little dock. It's just stuff that paintings are made out of. And it's funny because over the years, we've gone through different seasons. That season in particular was winter, so it was a cold weekend, and the Chesapeake had this thin layer of ice all the way across it. Thin enough that you can throw a rock, and basically if you did it right, it would skip and make this weird sound all the way across that part of the Chesapeake. It was thin enough that I was actually a little tempted to try and put my weight on it. Thank God my wife was there because I almost sent my boys out. But what I've learned is depending on what season you go to, the Chesapeake Bay is completely and totally dependent on the environment around it. There's some times where we've gone and it's been the middle of a storm season, and to see the way that bay begins to turn up, the way that the winds and the waves kind of dictate the conditions are amazing. There's been times where sitting on the dock, there's not a cool breeze. There's sometimes just a strong wind coming off of the bay, totally dictated by its environment. There's little boats that kind of sit on everyone's dock, and depending on the condition, you can kind of see the way those boats respond to their environment. It's ups and downs, totally dependent on what's happening around it. It is beautiful, but there's also times where it's scary. It is miraculous, and yet there's times where it feels treacherous. And for so many of us, this is kind of, we're being honest, maybe a picture of your 2024 so far. That you sense yourself being lifted and shifted by the environment around you. Unsure, disconnected. You might even wake up sometimes saying things like, how did I end up here? A product of our environment. I want to start this morning where I believe we'll end. Can I just tell you, if that's you in this room, there is a hope. There is one who lives and reigns above the winds and the waves. One who is waiting for us in the middle of the storm. And this morning, I want to take a look at what it looks like to anchor yourself to Jesus. Hebrews chapter 6, verse 19, the writer compels us. He says this. He says, this hope is a strong and trustworthy. Someone say trustworthy. Trustworthy anchor for our souls. It leads us through the curtains into God's inner sanctuary. Now, I did a little research on this idea of an anchor. It seems to be something that all of us kind of have a sense of, but quite honestly, the more I studied, the more your anchor tattoo that you got when you were 20 years old in the service is probably wrong. Anchors are something that have been a part of culture for years. Matter of fact, some of the earliest anchors could be found image of such in catacombs. Like, when it comes to anchors, for many of us, we think it's all about weight. But quite honestly, it has some things to do with weight. But anchors are less about weight and more about what that anchor bites into. Anchors are created to bite. It's the reason why anchors look something like this. This is kind of a traditional perspective of an anchor. There's different types of anchors, but for the most part, this is what we're accustomed to. It's why I think that maybe your tattoo is wrong, because if you notice the top where you have that stock, the stock is actually twisted. But really where I want to focus your attention is to what's called the bill on an anchor. The objective of the bill is to bite. See, for so many of us, we think that the objective of that anchor is weight. But I've always thought to myself, like legitimately, the weight of that anchor is already sitting in the boat. All I've kind of done is displace it. There is something to do with friction on the bottom of the floor, but for anybody who's ever been in any type of rough seas, you know that you can throw an anchor down as much as you want. If it doesn't bite, you're still subject to the winds and the waves. That it needs to bite into something. Not only does it need to bite, what I've learned is what it bites into, what you anchor to dictates your movement. What you anchor to will dictate your movement. There's a story of an infamous story of a boat in trouble found in Acts chapter 27. Verse 27 reads like this: about midnight in the 14th night of the storm, as we were being driven across the Sea of Adria, the sailors sensed land was near. You know, again, the writer communicates this idea that the sailors had this sense. They had grown up around water. They understood how to navigate water. They were experts at what they were doing, and they sensed in the middle of the storm that land was near. So they dropped a weighted line, and they found water that was 120 feet deep. Now, a weighted line, again, I did too much research for this message. The weighted line is simply a line that has a weight on the end of it. I know what you're thinking, brilliant. But what they did was they would drop that weight over the side, and depending on how long it took to hit the bottom where the water rose on the line, they were able to tell you how deep the depth of that area was. But a little bit later, they measured again, and they found that it was only 90 feet. So a change of depth of about 30 feet over a small amount of time, basically what that meant is they had only a little bit of time before 30 became 0 feet, and that ship would crash. Spoiler alert, we're not going to read it totally. The ship still crashes. It says a little later they measured again and found it was only 90 feet deep. Verse 29, at this rate, they were afraid. We would soon be driven against the rocks along the shore, so they threw out 4 anchors from the back of the ship and prayed for daylight. Okay, I know that maybe no one in this room, or maybe a couple of you, but most of us have never really had to navigate when to throw an anchor out or what an anchor does. And John, all these sailing analogies, I'm kind of lost. Here's the truth. Every one of us knows what it's like to be in the middle of a storm. We know what it's like to wake up, get that report from a doctor, and be shook to the core of who we are. We know what it's like to get the phone call from your child who has chosen to walk away from the Lord and finds himself in a tough place. We know what it's like to be shook. And these sailors, expert at what they did, are at a moment where they find themselves shook. So they did the only thing they knew to do. They begin to throw out as much weight as humanly possible. Hopefully, something will hook. If we can just figure out what we need to do, get it out the boat, something's going to work. It is a picture of where we live in 2024 for so many of us in seasons of uncertainty. What we start to do is throw out weight to see what's going to work. We try mysticism. We try a new health routines. We try new relationships. We go back to maybe some old addictions in an attempt because our heart is just in the middle of the storm. Tell me what I need to do to stop. If I continue on this same path, there's certain destruction. And what I've just learned about who we are as people, we know when destruction's coming. We know when destruction's coming. And in those moments, again, we do everything we can to display as much weight as possible, hoping that something will work, because all we want to do is to stop. So we do all that we can to anchor down. Romans gives us a little bit of a different perspective. Watch this. Romans chapter 8, verse 23 to 25. For we know that all creation has been groaning as in the pain of childbirth right up to the present time. And we believers also groan. Even though we have the Holy Spirit within us as a foretaste of future glory, for we long for our bodies to be released from sin and suffering, we too wait eagerly, hope for the day when God will give us the full rights as his adopted children, including our new bodies that he has promised us. We were given this hope when we were saved. If we already have something, we do not need to hope for it. But we look forward to something we don't yet have. We must be patient and confidently. Here's the truth that the writer of Romans wants you to know. Is number one, in this world you will have trouble. Sound familiar? He's letting you know, even us who are children of God, filled with the Holy Spirit, the expectation is that there are times when the winds and the waves will turn up. Jesus said it himself. Again, in this world you will have trouble. If somebody has fed you a false gospel that says you come to Jesus and everything's just going to be great, I'm just going to tell you, God bless you, we probably need to have a talk about your theology. The idea isn't that as believers, we have this smooth sailing experience. Matter of fact, I will tell you that quite often as you follow and pursue a committed relationship with God, there are times where he guides you into treacherous waters. You're like, John, what? No. As believers, we just have to know that when the seas are kicking up, when your neighbors don't know what to do, when your coworkers don't know what to do, it is us as children of God, a city on the hill that can live as an example of how to navigate stormy waters. What I love about this picture is that the writer in Romans lets you know, yes, you have to know that there are moments where we would again experience these seasons, experience these waves, but the difference is, well, we anchor to Jesus. Our hope is different. As believers, you and I, we anchored to him. Back to that passage in Hebrews chapter 6, verse 19. This hope is a strong and trustworthy anchor for your soul. It leads us into the curtains, into God's inner sanctuary. Jesus has already gone in there for us. I wish I had more time. If you get some time this week, reading the whole of Hebrews 6 gives you some great insight. He gives to talk about the oath and the promise, how God was faithful in his oath and the promise that he gave to Abraham. But then the writer flips it on his head. Paul, in the book of Hebrews, flips it on his head as he begins to communicate this idea. Yes, but the better hope and the better oath is that Jesus has come and given his life to make access for you and I to live in relationship with the Father. That he is the greater promise and the greater oath. He is the one that we are to anchor our souls to. The other passage that messes me up about boats is found in Mark chapter 4. Mark chapter 4, if you have your Bibles there, verse 38 says this: Jesus was sleeping at the back of the boat with his head on a cushion. And the disciples woke him up shouting, "Teacher, don't you care that we're going to drown?" I find that passage so humorous because I can sleep anywhere, guys, in the house. Just nobody. Okay, there's a couple of y'all. Ladies in the house, how many of you have husbands that will tell you that he's watching TV when the truth is he's watching the back of his eyes? And then he ends up rewinding every 5 seconds once he wakes up and realizes he misses that part of the game. You know what I'm saying? Am I touching a nerve? Y'all know what I'm talking about. I can fall asleep anywhere. Movie theaters, in a car, on a park bench, standing up. I can fall asleep anywhere. Not totally sure that I can fall asleep safely and soundly in a boat that's in the middle of a storm. Not sure. Matter of fact, if I'm in a car with an unsafe driver, there are times. Come on, somebody. It took me a little while. My wife is a phenomenal driver. That has no indication on the driving abilities of my wife because I sleep soundly when she drives. But I'm in the car with some boys. There's sometimes when I'm in the car with my boys and I'm like, yeah, I can't even blink. Like, I'm a little worried to blink. I can't imagine. And the difference, watch this, the difference is the confidence that I have. The reason why Jesus was able to sleep in the back of the boat was because there was a different confidence he had. I want to make sure that that's clear. We'll go back to it in a moment. But Jesus is walking under a different authority and confidence than everybody else in the boat. And you notice that they start freaking out. We like making fun of them because they say, "Don't you care that we're going to drive?" Remember that in this boat, we're talking disciples who had spent time around the ocean, around the seas. We're not talking about novices. We're talking about some of these men who had grown up in fish their whole lives. This was stuff that they were accustomed to. What it means is the storm was that severe. And still, Jesus slept in the back of the boat. Goes on to say, when Jesus woke up, he rebuked the winds and said to the waves, "Silence, be still." Suddenly, the wind stopped, and there was a great calm. Then he asked, "Why are you afraid? Do you still have no faith?" Now, I want to pause there for a moment because what we see here is Jesus doing a phenomenal job communicating, teaching, rebuking, correcting in this moment. And he's letting them know that here, I just need you to hear me. I'm kind of curious as to your fear. Don't you know I'm in the boat? It goes on to say this, the disciples, verse 40, then he asked them, "Why are you afraid? Do you still have no faith?" 41, the disciples were absolutely terrified. "Who is this man?" they asked. "Even the winds and the waves obey him." Now, we struggle a little bit with this passage because we don't understand some of the historical context. You just have to know many of the Old Testament prophetic writings that would have been taught to these disciples at a young age spoke of a Messiah who would come and have dominance over the seas and the waves. Not just the Old Testament writings, but even some old rabbinical writings spoke specifically about his dominance over the seas and the waves. So when Jesus stands up in the middle of their storm and tells it all to be still, they are perplexed because this man who they were following, they had seen him do miracles, but in this moment showed a dominance in nature that was prophesied of his coming. Like, this is a huge moment in the life of Jesus and the disciples. This dude is the real deal. They didn't know what to do with themselves. But I want to make sure that you see this. Notice that as he stands up, he speaks, the winds stop. He stands up, he speaks, and the waves stop. But notice never does it indicate that the boat stopped. See, often when it comes to anchoring, the objective is to anchor down so that we can stop. But what we find here, not just in this incredible passage, but through the totality of Scripture, is that when we are anchored to heaven, we're actually not anchored down, we're anchored up. And when we're anchored up now, again, because what you're anchored to dictates your movement, we are now set to the direction of heaven. And I'm just going to tell you, there are seasons in life where we do need to stop and take rest. I'm a huge proponent. If you call me on a Friday, there's a really good chance you're going to get my voicemail. Why? Because I spend time in Sabbath every Friday. That's kind of my deal. That's how I navigate. I can't do anything I do without some form of rest. But even then, it is set by the direction of heaven. There are times where we want to stop and God's saying, no, we don't stop here. There are times where we think we need to go left and the Spirit of God is moving us right. Like in seasons of turmoil, there are moments where we feel like we just need to drop anchors over. But when we are anchored to the movement of heaven, our hearts, our lives are dictated by where the Spirit leads us. Where the Spirit leads us. We anchor upward. Anchoring down stops progression. Anchoring up allows us to be directed by the movements of heaven. Anchoring down is often about our activity. Anchoring up is about the hope and the trust we put in Him. So then the bigger question that I would submit this morning is, how do I anchor upward? I am originally from New Bedford, Massachusetts. Any Massachusetts people in here? Yes, let's go. Massachusetts. We moved when I was, just turning 8. And about a year later, we went back, and I could not wait. We went back for a summer vacation, and I got the chance to hang out with my cousin Lewis, who's still one of my best friends in life, and my friend Isaac, and a bunch of my cousins, Richie and Tony, and all those guys, Jose. And one day in particular, while we were on vacation, we were going from one part of the city to the other. If you've ever been to New Bedford, it's a small community, so you can walk from one part of this town to the other. Some of you grew up in towns like that. And we lived off Liberty Street. That's where I grew up. And there was a section of housing that was between us and where my grandmother lived. And so me and my cousins started walking to my grandmother's spot. And as we were walking through this housing, one of my cousins saw a young lady who had a pit bull. And so he saw her and he greeted her because, well, quite honestly, he was trying to mac. And he thought she was cute. And so we start making our way over. I'm a dog person. I love dogs. I've never met a dog I didn't like, even the aggressive ones, even the cute ones. I've always liked dogs. At that point in my life, I had no fear of dogs whatsoever. Unfortunately, as we got close, the dog apparently didn't like my cousin. And he went to grab at him, but I was in between, so he grabbed at my leg. Now, I'm fine. I'm good. Look, it works. Thank God, as he went out to grab my leg, they pulled back the leash, and the dog's teeth just scraped my legs barely, but grabbed a hold of my jeans. And I don't know if you know this about pit bulls. They're a great breed, but their jaws lock. So now this dog's got my jeans, and I went one way, he went the other, and just tore the bottom of my jeans off. So I'm sitting there with like one full leg and one half. Looked like a bad TLC video back in the day. I don't know about to sing waterfalls, but I remember the owner grabbed a hold of the jeans that was in the dog's mouth and began to violently shake the jeans to try to get them out of the dog's mouth. I mean, to the point that this dog, who was fairly big, was basically lifted up off the ground by this 17-year-old girl by the jaw lock that he had on those pants. What I learned in that moment about those dogs is you can completely and totally control the direction of that dog based off what it bites. Listen, if we're going to live in 2024 as children of God, we got to choose to lock in. What you bite and grab a hold to will dictate your movement and direction. And the Spirit of God is waiting to grab a hold of us, but we just are so entertained by other things that there are moments in life where we just have to figure out what does it mean to bite, to grab a hold of the Spirit of God and allow the movement of heaven to dictate our direction. Psalms chapter 62, verse 5 is one of those favorite passages. The psalmist writes, and many of you have this memorized. It reads simply like this: "Let all that I am quietly wait before God, for my hope is in him." Verse 6, "He alone is my rock, my salvation, my fortress, where I will not be shaken." How many people have heard that passage before? Unfortunately, we read verse 6 a lot, but we barely read verse 5. Notice, what's the sense of a fortress, a rock, something that our salvation is based on, if not shaken, if we don't learn how to bite into that thing? And the writer indicates how. He says, "Let all that I am quietly wait before the Lord." That the way that we learn how to grab a hold of the rock of our salvation, to anchor upward, is to learn how to wait. You know, "Oh, Pastor John, are you for real? You're going to come all the way here to Hope to preach a whole message where the practical the implications is to pray?" Yeah. Well, A, yes. But B, I just want to make you understand why. Remember, often the reason we lack the ability to anchor and bite on is because we just don't have a relationship. The reason why you don't trust and you don't hope is because you don't have a relationship. My sister-in-law, who we went to see in Maryland, several years before that, she was probably 17, 18 years old, and as a family, we all went to Tennessee. And you know, Tennessee, if you've ever been to Gatlinburg, it's like got those like weird little roadside attractions, you know what I'm talking about? So one day after like going to Wendy's or whatnot, we noticed that there was this 90-foot bungee jump on the side of the road. Looked like somebody just set it up last week type deal, you know what I mean? Like there was a semi parked in the back that they were gonna break it down and go to the next city type deal. And I remember at this point, we had no kids. I was still semi-young and being dumb, trying to tease my 17, 18-year-old sister-in-law. I'm like, I bet you won't ever do that because you're afraid. And she looked at me and says, "I'll do it if you do it." And at that point, I didn't know what to do because now she's trying my manhood. And I'm just going to also tell you, God made me short because I'm afraid of heights. He knew that. So like that was the... So at that point, I'm like, I'll do this, pulled in the whole time, just praying in tongues in the back of my mind, like, don't know what this is about. Got out the car. We read all the safety stuff. I'm waiting for this 17-year-old for that fear thing to kick in. I don't know what I was thinking. I don't know because it never kicked in. We got 10 feet up, like there's a little platforms like 10 feet up. We're on the stairs, and I look at her, it's like, there's no shame in turning around now. There's none. It's fine. We get 20 feet up, and I'm like, it's fine. No one will even know. No one will even know if you turn around. This has nothing. You don't have to prove nothing to me. I'll walk down with you. We get up 30, 40 feet, 60 feet. I'm looking over the edge. I'm like, listen, we can just pretend that we never had this conversation. I have $100 in my back pocket right now. Chris, no, we could do it. We get all the way to the top. They tie this thing on me. And I'm like, Lord, this is how I'm going to die. This is how I'm going to die. And the guy with a half-smoked cigarette out of his mouth, mangy beards, like in his 60s, hat on backwards, so skinny, has a Grateful Dead shirt on that's baggy, looks over and says, "It's not going to be that bad, trust me." You want me to trust you? Not sure the cigarette's helping you out right now, buddy. Not sure I'm going to trust... Not sure you made the best life decisions to put you at a place where I'm going to trust you in this moment as a complete... Why? I had no relationship. If you're in this room finding yourself in seasons where you're like, I just don't know how I got here. Waking up in a season of uncertainty, being shook, feeling like you're crashing against the rocks. Hear me. The way that you anchor up is to wait quietly on the Lord. The more we learn about him, the more our heart learns to trust. So, yes, you have to learn how to quiet the other voices. This is one of the spiritual practices in 2024 that we need to learn, something we need to teach our children. You know, it's funny because this wasn't an issue until about 60 years ago, and probably less than that now, 20 to 30 years of the hyper reality, like at the macro level, the fact that there are millions of distractions waiting for you. How many people have felt your phone buzz 16 times as you walked in here? Notice that with every one of those buzzes, it's another voice in your head saying, oh, that might be this person who needs that thing. At the moment you walk out of the auditorium, many of you, and this isn't a knock, this is where I live, the first thing you do is grab a hold of your phone, opening your heart to more voices. Learning how to quiet the voices around us is critical in 2024. That we would learn what it means, like the psalmist, to wait quietly before God. That idea of waiting is not just this moment where I'm sitting and I'm waiting. It's not just an indicator of time. It's also a condition of posture, because as he's waiting, he's preparing to serve the Lord. What does your morning time with the Lord look like? Oh, John, I'm an evening guy. Okay, what's your evening with the Lord look like? What does that prepared time with the Lord look like? Well, John, okay, now you're going to tell me I need to read this devotional and check out this list? No. I'm just telling you, if your whole world is crashing down, it would value you to spend some moments quieting those voices and learn about a God who is unshakable. That he is waiting desperately for you and I to engage in relationship, that the more you know about him, this is what's crazy. The more you wait on him, we learn about him. But here's what you might not know, is that at the intimate level, he's the one who created you. The scripture says that in the quiet place, that the God of all you think you're busy, the God of all the universe set time aside to weave you intimately together. When we spend time waiting on God, we not only learn more about him, you learn more about you. The psalmist knows that before the noise of my day, before the treachery of my culture, before everybody else has a say in their opinion of how my heart is shaped and crafted, I will wait quietly before the Lord, for my hope is in him alone. It's tough to trust someone you don't know. Okay, all cards on the table. This has been a crazy couple of weeks for me, as you can imagine. As a church, I just need you to know, you are giving one of the best gifts you can possibly give to our state. If you're new here and you didn't get a chance to meet Pastor Mike, you got 4 more weeks. He is an incredible man. And yet all week long, as I was praying for this moment, the Lord was quick to remind me, there are some people in this room that are facing storms that they have never faced before. That this has been a wicked year for you. That you feel the crashing and the pressure of the waves. And again, you're saying things like simply, I just don't know how we got here. I believe that the Spirit of God has compelled my heart that you would be compelled this morning to reassess your relationship with the Lord and choose to anchor upward.